In today's video, we're looking at staircases. The model I've got in front of me is just a simple staircase. So it's got a flight up to a landing and then another flight up to what could be a first level or the next level. This is modeled using a slab, just normal slab. So the way I modeled this was to put my UCS vertical and then just traced from the engineer's drawings, traced the shape of the slab, and then obviously the depth of the slab is 1500 to give you that. I did the same on that side, and I just have a filler in between. So if you look at it, if they're all the same materials, Tekla pretty much shows it monolithic, and it really, it's a good result, the way that Tekla actually does this. It's pretty good. So if you see a little line, so I've just noticed there's a little line there, all you have to do is just take that little note and delete it, and it sort of cleans up that face nicely for you. There was an unnecessary note there, but I mean, it really does a good job if you can do it that way. Now, this is not precast stairs, it's not components. This is going to be straightforward conventional modeling, something you do come across quite often, especially if your stairs and your design of your stairs does not align with the standard components we have in Tekla. We will do future videos on components and how to do them, but for now let's just stick to the conventional rebar like we've done with this whole series to get you guys accustomed to the rebar tools. So for this, I think what we're going to do is let's just go into plan view, and we'll take a elevation on grid line 1. We'll also take one on 3 so we can work on the sides of these two. So over to the view tab, view list, we'll take grid line 1, and we'll also take grid line 3. So we've got those three. We'll flick back to the rendered view, the plan view, and I'll grab all of that and say right click, work area in all views. So we just maximize our view to see only what we need to see. Okay, I'm going to start by doing this bottom flight first, and it's on grid line 1. So we'll do the bottom bar that goes in. It doesn't really matter where you start, whether you start with landings or whether you start with the foundation or what. I just like to start with the flights, but it's really up to you, how you want to do it. So what I'm going to do is also with staircases, just a note on the reinforcement itself. A lot of times engineers will give you, for the main reinforcement, which is along the length of the stair, they'll give you a number of bars, and for the distribution they'll give you bars at the spacing. So that's the normal convention for these. So the first thing I'm going to do with this is I am going to draw a construction line, and I'll keep it red 500 solid line so it shows up in the video a little bit better. And I'm just going to trace the bottom. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm really looking for that intersection line at the top, because this reinforcement covers through to the top. So what I'll do is go to the More tab and then Point Input. And this is rebar sets, by the way. Make sure that you've got your linear. And I'll load my defaults just in case I've made some settings here. Now, these are the main bars, so let's stick to the red color. And also, I can see from the radius there, we're sitting with a leak, so let's just stick the main bar. And then for the distribution, I'm going to pick a number, and the engineer wants 8 of them, and let's just pull it 50 millimeters aside. Well, actually, let's just take the calculator, let's see what happens. And then, okay, that's it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at this point here, and then I'm going to hover all the way across to the top of the slab there, that intersection, and then I'm just going to, it doesn't really matter. There is a function where, if you can see the values that run there is quite accurate. There is a function in Tekla where you just, if you're holding your shift key, it will jump to sort of values. But I found this a bit temperamental, because if you're on the line, it doesn't work. You've got to be sort of off the line, and then you sort of battle to keep your author. So it doesn't really matter, just pick any point, because we're going to fix that length anyway. Once we're done with that, we can middle mouse, and then for the spacing, I just rotate 3D quickly, and I'll pick one of these stair threads there, and just like that we have those bars in place. Now what we need to do with those bars, first thing is we need to extend them at the bottom here, so they actually tie into the footing. So what I'll do is I'll click on the bar, go to End Detail, I'll load my standard again. And then for the hook type, I will go for a 180-degree hook. And then that's just going to put a hook right there. We want this to extend. So adjustment type, we'll say end offset. And let's just pick a length of 150 mils. I don't know, let's just pick something. And then all I do is hover over this edge of the concrete and it extends. Now you can see there, if I just hover across there, that's probably not enough. So what we can do is click on the line and say this extension we're going to pull to 200 millimeters. And if we then go Control P, we can see that's really nicely done. The second thing we want to do is these staircases will always, you need to give the guys a bit of room for tolerance. So you have to break up the bars. If you give them one long bar like this, they have to have their formwork spot on, angle spot on, otherwise it doesn't work, and that's not realistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this bar twice. We're going to split it here for starters, because they'll probably end up pouring this footing first. So we'll have starters, and then on top there we'll just have like a V-bar that wraps up that top. So let's do that. So if I click on this bar, I can head over to the splitter, load my standards again just in case I've made settings, and then just by looking at that modifier I can see the arrows pointing that way. So I'm going to assume when I put in the splitter that arrow, the splitter direction is going to be the same. So I want my lap to be on the right, so I'll go right. Also I want that split to be 200 millimeters off that end of that line. So for the offset I'm going to type in 200 mils there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over that same edge. Tekla will say you're duplicating objects because it's already seeing an end modifier there for the hook, and you say that's okay, just keep that. And it just like that, it's done that. So what's happened now is if I just take a angular dimension here from this to there, well, sloping dimension rather, it's 200 mils. So you get 204 there because it's if I measured along this plane, it would be 200 mils. That's the skewed dimension. But so what it's done is it's offset the start of the splitter 200 mils of that line, and then applied the split to the right of that. And that's exactly what we wanted. So now we've got starter bars and we've got the next bar. So we want to do the same on this. So if I click on that bar, again, we go splitter. The same offset 200 from that side, but this time we want the split on the left-hand side. So we'll just toggle this to left, and then we'll pick that edge of the concrete there, and it splits it. So we've inserted one single bar, but we ended up with 3 perfect bars for that flight. The last thing we need to do to wrap this up is to click on this bar and to go to end modifier. I'll load my standard again, and then for the hook type I'm going to go none, no hook. But for the adjustment type I'm going to go leg offset or a leg length, and I'm going to make the length for a 1200 or 12 millimeter bar. It's 450 mils, and then I'll just hover over this leg, and Tekla will then force that leg to be 450. Okay, so that flight is done. So let's go and repeat the same process with the top flight. So if I flick over to grid line 3, which is on this flight, we can do exactly the same here. So what I'll do is go L for my L for my construction line. I've got a shortcut on my construction line. So if you go to the bottom, again, the reason why we're doing it is to get those intersections there so we can use them. And now that I've got that, I can just go again, more, point input, make sure that all my parameters are correct, and then say I need a bar that goes from there to there, all the way down to where it intersects at the bottom, and then across there again. And it doesn't matter what those legs are, we're going to fix them now. And say okay, and then for your distribution, your guideline, we'll just pick a thread there, and that will now match these. So what we can do is, again, like we did before, start breaking this lot up. So we'll start at the bottom, and we will go end modifier, and we still have the 450 set with no hook. So we'll just go and fix these distances first, so you can see how it fixes up the leg. We'll do the same on the top. We need to fix up that leg. Okay, so the legs are taken care of. Now what we need to do is just break them up. So we'll go splitter, and looking at that direction, we want to split on the left with 200. That's correct, and I'll pick the top one there, so it splits it in the right spot. Now on this one, we want to split the other side, so it's going right, and we pick that edge there, and it splits it. And just like that, we've now completed the top flight main reinforcement as well. So we've put in one We've now put in two rebar sets, but we've broken it up into a total of 6 bars. So that's always the best approach, because you don't have to then fiddle with spacing. But talking about spacing, let's just go back to the top view, and I'll put it into transparency mode. Let's just have a look at what the bars came out to, because we never addressed that. So we can see we've got really funny spacing there. So what we can do is let's just push this 50 millimeters aside and say modify. And it happens to be 7 at 200, which is 8 bars. So that works quite well. Let's do the same on this one. We'll click on this bar. It's got the same thing. So we'll do 50 and 50 there, force it, and say OK. And perfect 7. Now that will look good on the drawings when the spacings work out perfectly like that. So now that we've done that, what we can do now is look at the distribution for the two flights and fix them up quickly. So for distribution, I like to use the longitudinal bar tool. And for that, what I'm going to do is pick a different class too. So just to separate the issues. And I'll stick to the... Actually, I'll just wipe them out. We can just see what Tekla gives us. The target spacing will be 300 because it's just distribution steel. And I think that's it. So what we'll do is hover over the shape. And we only pick the bottom because that's the only part we want to put in distribution steel. Pick that one and say, OK. And Tekla is happy to put in the green bars for us. Now with these bars, what we need to do is to also just add some hooks to them. So we'll go to end detail, load up our standards, and then for the hook type, we're going to use 180 degrees. And then what I can do is I can just hover over this edge, swing around, and hover over this edge, and that's it. So now what we can do is just to finalize that is go over to grid line 1. Make sure we're on Control P, we're on the edge, and just look at the distribution. So we look, if we click on the bar and we just hover around, we can see the little arrow there on the spacing bar. So this is the start and the top is the end. So we can see from the start, we just need to push it a bit away there. So for the start, we'll say give us a 100 millimeter offset. So that pushes it away from that foundation, which is great. And then if we look at the distribution, we can see it's not great. So what we can do is say, give us a odd last spacing. Last spacing is an odd one. And that brings us to that one there. So that could work. It might be it might be an issue. But what we can do is just say, omit the last one, modify. So that will end up with something like that. I think that should be okay. We'll just see if the slab reinforcement comes in, if that hook's going to be a problem. Otherwise, I think that's going to be fine. Okay, so let's do the same with the other flight. So again, I'll just rotate around here, and I'll say give me a longitudinal, and we'll just keep the spacings as they are. Hover over that, just pick the bottom flight, say okay, and that's done that. If we now select the bar, we can add our end modifiers. We still have our settings of 180 degrees. Hover over this edge, let's add it, and then flick around. Hover over this edge, adds that hook. And now, while we've got that, while we've got that bar selected, let's look at the arrow. Now this time it's pointing down. I don't like it. I'm just going to point it. I'm just going to flip the switch here to swap ends. So it's going up. So what we can see here now is going up, we've got a flexible last space modify, so it keeps that all in line, flexible, and we can say omit the last bar, modify, so it omits the last bar. So good. So let's just go and have a look at what grid line 3 looks like. So in here, it looks like we might be fine there. We might have to tweak them once we've put in the slab reinforcement. Okay, so at this point, if we look at our 3D model, we've got our flights fully reinforced. Now we can start filling in the other parts of it. So for the foundation, we use ligatures, and they'll obviously match the number of the main reinforcement. But I'll just delete this construction lines for now because we don't really need them anymore. If we look at this shape of this, if I just click on here, like we don't have a closed loop. So if we go to cross section, we hover over this, we can't really complete. I mean, you can if you only select 3 faces and then start joining the faces, the rebar faces together again. That's a bit unnecessary. So what we're going to do in this case is, again, I'm going to go over to more, and I'm going to use the point input. And I am going to make sure this time that I select N12 ligatures, and I'll make them class 5. That's my sort of own um, standard. I like to use cyan color 5 for my ligatures, and for my bottom one red, for my bottom two green, so I always sort of know where I am. And then for the spacing type, it's going to be a number, and that number's got to match the main bars, which is 8. And I do want to generate all the bars, and I think the offset will also match the flights for now, which was 50. And let's just keep it like that and see what happens. Now, where you start this is going to be where Tekla is going to expect the ears of the ligature. So I'm just going to put it in the bottom so it doesn't bother the top reinforcement. So I'll click there, click there. Now, no, this is 300 wide, so I'll just go along 300 and then down again, back to where the start point is, and then accept that for being correct. And then for the distribution, I'm just going to pick edge here and make sure I'm perpendicular to the opposite side. And that sort of brings our ligatures in. And now what we can do with that ligatures, we can just say give us an end detail. I'll load my defaults and make sure this is set to 135 degrees, and I'm happy with that. Click on this edge and it generates both the hooks. Now, just a note, I think I've said it in previous videos before, but just for these that didn't watch those, if you have a let me just delete that one. If you have a situation where your ligatures sort of start and end at that point, this concrete is exactly the midpoint between the two. So if you put an end modifier there, it will put an end modifier to both points. Otherwise, it selects the end of the bar closest to the modifier. So that's how I normally just select the edge of the concrete. It just cuts down on another step. Now, in terms of the 50, why that worked out well is because 50 was measured to this bar, and you can see it sort of lines up perfectly with that. So that sort of worked out well for us. Now, in terms of the distribution, still in this ligature, the bottom steel, I like to use the longitudinal again, and for this I will load the main bar, so 12 main, and back to the green color. And then for the start, I'll just delete them totally so Tekla doesn't auto calc. The creation method will be a number, and I want 2 bars down the bottom. And that's it. And now if I hover over this shape, I pick the bottom. I do not pick the top. I only pick the bottom. Say OK. So Tekla puts those in for us. And then what we can do is we can click on this bar and say give us an end detail and make sure it's 90 degrees. Hover over this edge of the concrete and then hover over that edge of the concrete. So that completes that bar. Now, if you get a situation like this, where it's sort of clashing, that's an easy fix. If we click on the ligature, we can look at the directions. We need to modify the start point. So if we go Control P, just to see it from the top, we need to modify the start point. We want to put it on that side. So that will be 2 bar diameters, and the bar diameter of a 12 is 14. So we need to add 28 millimeters to this. And then also with the 28, we need to modify the first spacing. So what we'll do is, let's see how that works. So for the start, which is this side, we're going to add 28 millimeters, so that's 78. And then for the creation method, we want a odd first spacing. And once we do that, modify, you can see our Tekla then pushes that bar exactly on that side, but it kept the spacing, and spacing for all the others are still remain the same. So these things can be calculated exactly very quickly if you just understand how the bar diameters work and how Tekla calculates the cover. Okay, so let's go to grid line 1, so we can see these bars in from the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my UCS. You see at the moment we've got the XZ plane. I want the XY plane because I want to do a copy and mirror. So there's 2 ways you can do that. You can either then go to your work plane and say parallel to the view plane, yeah. I've got a shortcut on my keyboard, Shift V, and if I click on the view, you can see how Tekla has now changed the XY. And now what we can do is we can grab this bar and say right click, copy special, mirror, and we can just mirror about the middle line there, copy, and that will carry over into the top. So with that, we've done the bottom and top. Now It's not strictly necessary because this is such a small staircase, but I'm going to show you how I put a center bar in there very quickly. So again, we hover over to rebar, longitudinal, and for our type, let's just make sure that we've got main bar here, and then a green bar again. And for the offset, I'm going to let Tekla do an auto calc. And for the number, I'm going to give it 3 bars. Now I give it 3 bars because I'm expecting a bar there, one in the middle, and one there. And then I'll show you what we will do to fix that up. It's the easiest way to do this. So if you click on this, you pick this side, that's the side we want to reinforce, and you say OK. So Tekla gives you the 3 bars as expected. And now all you have to do is click on that bar and go to exclude first and last. Modify. So you end up with a single bar and you don't have to worry about how the spacing works. Tekla does it all for you. So it's as simple as that. So all we need to do now is to add some end details to it. So again, yeah, we'll just make sure that we've got the 90 degree on the concrete edge and on the concrete edge. Okay, and now back to a layer grid line 1, and we still have our XY set. We can now just take that bar and say copy mirror around this center line and say copy, and that will transfer it to the other side for us. Now what we need to do is just go back to the rendered view. You see how we've got these clashes with this. Now I've seen a lot of people trying to move bars up and down to make them not clash. It's not necessary because on site what they'll do is they'll just rotate them a little bit. So if we click on this and we go to hook rotation, we go 5 degrees this side, and if we click on its opposite side, and I'm going to do 5 degrees there too because it's going to be wrong, but I'm going to show you why. So if you look at that bar now, you'll see, and let's isolate it so it's better visible. So we say show only selected. If we look at this bar from the side now, you'll actually see it's a twisted bar, and that's not right. So you've got to make sure that if you use those rotations, that is the opposite of this. So if you click on this one, this is at 5 degrees. The other one should be at -5 degrees. -5 degrees. That takes the twist away, so you still end up with a perfect bar. If you now go to single bar, you click on this bar, right click, inquire, you'll see you've got the double L and the perfect dimension, so it doesn't distort the bar. It's just a side note. Make sure that you go back to state to show you how that works. Now, in this one, we go the opposite. So in here, we go 5 for this side, and for that side, we go -5. So just by rotating those bars, you can see we've avoided the clashes in them, and that's what they'll do on site anyway, without having to stuff around with spacing, moving bars up and down, playing with numbers, and eventually it bites you. It just doesn't work that way. So let's just see here quickly. Okay, so that pretty much concludes, I think, the foundation for us. So let's move on to the slabs. They're really, really easy. So for this slab, again, if you go over to the crossing bar and you hover over, you can see the section is not ideal because we want to create only reinforcements in that area, and that's where this more point input tool really is quite handy. So what we can do in here again is just make sure that we've got the N12 as a main bar. We'll go to the red color, class 2. We are going to stick with Tekla calculated start and end offsets, and then for the distribution it's going to be a target. It's going to be 200 mils, and we do want to generate all the bars. And then let's just see quickly, if I now click around the shape of the slab, and we know that's 1300 because we saw it from the first dimension. If we click 1300 and then up there, that sort of concludes the shape. And then for the distribution, we can just go from this side all the way to that side, and Tekla sort of creates what looks like a leacher for us. Now, again, I'm just going to force the issue with the 50 and the 50 distribution, I think, just to make sure that that sort of ties in. And then what I'm going to do is, before, actually we didn't even need to do that, but well, let's just leave it like that because we still need to break up the bar so it's going to move around. So what I'm going to do here, this is a very short bar, and the idea is to have a U here and a U here, but this is only 1300. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do alternating U's. So the way I do that is click on the bar, go to your splitter, load the default, so make sure that you've got middle, and then for this one on this side, yeah, I'm going to go to the bottom face and I'm going to split the bar at 500 leg. And for this side, I'm going to go to the top face and split the bar at a 500 leg. And if you look at that now, what's happened is Tekla has now got, and maybe what we can do here is I'll just take away that spacing I put in. Okay, Tekla fixes it up by itself. If you look at this bar now, let's just isolate them. You can see what we have there is alternating bars. They are exactly the same bar. I mean, if you look at the inquiry, it's one line. It's exactly the same bar. It's got a 1200 leg and a 500 leg, but they sort of alternate upside down with each other. So it's sort of, it's a very effective way to reinforce. Let's just redraw all of that. So, okay, let's just look at the spacing quickly for a minute. So for the spacing, what I want to do is I want to just make sure that we're not, clashing with anything. So if we just hover through, it looks like down this end we might be in trouble. Let me just make sure. No, we're not, because this bar, it laps in the bottom. So we don't have a problem here. What we can do is we can leave it like that, or otherwise what we can do is we can say, give us a flexible first and last. If we say modify, that's almost better, because now we have bars really nicely in between. Okay, so we'll stick with that. Flexible last and first. All the others are 200 in between. See, so we've got 200 spacing, so you can see how we've got an odd 161 first, 161 last, and we've got 14 at 200, so that works well. Okay, now in terms of the distribution, it's exactly the same process. So we'll go more point input, and if we go, let me first show you what happens if you do put in a cross. If you go a crossbar, you can see there, because we modeled it as separately, you're not getting your full section. And even if you say, okay, I'll stretch the faces, we're going to have a problem. Yeah, it's going to try and generate bars that look like, yeah. And when it gets to this point, you see how the bars increase. So it wants a tapered range. So you're gonna get an error in a bar. So it's not advisable to use that. So what I'll do is I'll go more point input again. Make sure I'm linear. And then for this, I am going to go green bar as per tradition, and then start and end offset, we're just going to leave that out for now. We're going to target spacing 200 again, and then generate all the bars. So what we'll do is we'll start at this end, across to the other end, down the bottom, back to this end, and then up to where we started, and then middle mouse to accept that bar. And now for the spacing, I'll just pick on there and make sure I hit the perpendicular on the other end. Okay, so that inserts that there. Now we can see we do have a bit of a layering issue here, and the first thing we need to fix that layering, you'll see you can, if you click on the bar and you hit this to the inside, you'll see nothing happens. What we need to do first is just get that bar inside. So what I'll do is I'll go 75 millimeter offset on either end. If I do that, the bar sort of moves on the inside, and now if I click go to the inner, that bar then moves nicely inside of the other bar, no problem. Right, now that those bars are in, there's two things we need to do. We need to split them up, and we need to look for clashes at this point here. So what I'm going to do for this, I'm going to go Control P to look at it from the top. So for these ones, they're quite long. The bars are quite long. So we're looking at 3.1 meters. So we can afford to have a U on this side and a U on that side. So that makes it easy. We go Splitter, Standard. Make sure we're in the middle, and then hover over this bar and we grab our 500 again, 500 leg length. So we split that on that side. We go over to the other side, and again we grab our 500 splitter there. Now that we've got those two splitters, we can grab them. So it's this one here, and control that one there, and then make sure that in your pane you see bar splitter to selected, and we can say copy linear and copy it from the bottom of the slab to the top of the slab, and say copy. Okay, so that splits the bars. So now we end up with a U there with two 500 legs. We've got two straight bars, and we have a U this side. So if we click on this bar now and we look at inquire, we can see we have two lines. We've got our U's, our LLs, 500, 120, 500, and we have our straight bars, which is 3050 long. And yeah, the quantity will be the same because you've got a U bar either end, but you've also got a straight bar top and bottom. So So that works out well. So that pretty much takes care of that. So the only thing we now need to look at is the clashing on this end here. So if we click on that, we look at our spacing line again. Our spacing line, it's a lot of lines over here, but if you look at the spacing line, this is the light yellow one. So this is the start, that's the end. We can just play with spacing a little bit. So let's go to grid line 1 and let's have a look at it here. So we want to address this clash here. So we know if we click on the bar, the start is at this end. So let's try a few things. First thing is I can see it's odd spacing. Let's try odd end space, an odd last space, modify. Well, this is so good because a lot of times just by doing that, by having an odd, so look at that, you've got 5 at 200 and 1 at 150. By just doing that, you avoid all your clashes rather than trying to, be clever and play with cover and play with spacing and go exact and do all those tricks. Sometimes odd middle or a last or both sides solves your problem. Now that we've done that, we don't need grid line 1 anymore. We can actually kill it. And all we need to do now is address this top one. Now for this one, it's exactly the same process. We'll put in the main reinforcement first. So we'll go more input and we go 12 millimeter bar. It's going to be a red one. We've got the 50, and we have the number of, which is 8 to match the landing, the flight main reinforcement. And then we can do here is just copy these around the shape again. And again, we just have to follow the dimensions. And for the spacing, it's over there, and that's done. And for this, we can do exactly the same as what we did downstairs. And we can split it into 2. So we'll go splitter. Again, just make sure that all your values are right. This one will split at the bottom at a 500. And this one will split at the top at a 500. So we get those alternating bars again. So you can see the alternating bars. No clashes. And then for the distribution, we'll do the same thing. We'll go more, point input. We'll change our class to 3. And because we had 75 at the bottom, let's try 75 up here. And then the number is, again, just the target spacing of 200. And we'll go around the perimeter. And for the distribution spacing, it's just over there. So that sort of sorts that out. And now you can see we've got a layer problem again. If you click on that bar, you can just say move to the inner and click it again. Okay, and that's done. And now all we need to do is, again, we've got clashes there we need to address. All we need to do now is just split this bar up. Now, this is, again, such a small landing. Maybe the alternating bars will be the trick here as well. So let's just do the same there. So what I'll do is this one I'll split at the top, and we can split this one at 500. So we'll split that one there at the top, and this one will split at the bottom. And sometimes you have to rotate the bar to actually get it. So we'll split this one at the sometimes, you've got to just be patient and try and get the splitting 500. There we go. So what we've got now is we've got a split at the top and a split at the bottom. We've got those alternating bars against that work well. So the only thing now we have to address is this. If we click on the bar, again, our spacing line, we need to address the end. Now, again, let's just try our trick with a odd last space. So we go flexible last space, modify, and that seems to have done it. Now, we do have an issue over here. So what we can do with that is we can push this in a bit, but if you push that in, you're also going to have to push that one in. You're also going to have to push that one in. But that is just fine tweaking. I mean, we've got one single issue there versus all the others that are seemingly perfect. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and you've learned something from it. That pretty much does it for this video. This is a simple conventional way of reinforcing a slab. They won't, or a staircase rather, they won't all be like that. Some will have reinforcement at the top depending on what happens here and what type of stair it is. Sometimes when it's a single flight, you'll have reinforcement at the top maybe even reinforcement here. But we'll do those in following videos. But for now, this is a double flight, a conventional staircase, and that's pretty much the norm. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next video.